The first car got booted right around halftime of the neighborhood barbecue, and I still remember the sound the guy made when he saw it. Not anger at first, confusion. Pure, helpless confusion, like his brain couldn't process how the rules he spent years defending had somehow turned around and bitten him in the ass. By the time the ninth car got locked down, people were yelling into phones. One woman was crying beside a Lexus SUV, and our HOA president looked like a man realizing, in real time, that power only works when everybody agrees to pretend you have it. The funny part is, none of this started because of parking. It started because one man got addicted to control. Back then, I lived in a subdivision outside Asheville, North Carolina, the kind of neighborhood developers advertise with words like peaceful, family-oriented, and upscale community living. Translation: beige houses, identical mailboxes, tiny strips of decorative grass nobody actually enjoyed mowing, and an HOA that treated every cracked flower pot like a federal offense. I'd moved there after my divorce because, honestly, I wanted quiet. My ex-wife got the house in Charlotte. I got a decent settlement and a strong desire to not hear another human being argue about granite countertops ever again. For a while, it was fine. My next-door neighbor, Diane, used to bring over banana bread every Sunday morning. Across the street was a retired firefighter named Lou who spent most afternoons washing the same red pickup truck like it was a museum artifact. Kids rode bikes through the cul-de-sac, people waved when they walked their dogs, and for about 6 months, the HOA barely existed outside the occasional email reminding us not to leave trash bins out overnight. Then came Russell Kane. Russell wasn't technically new to the neighborhood, but after he got elected HOA president, it was like somebody flipped a switch inside him. Before that, he was just another middle-aged guy grilling burgers in cargo shorts. Afterward, he started walking around with a clipboard. I'm serious. Every evening around 6, he'd patrol the neighborhood like some kind of suburban park ranger, stopping to photograph lawns, measuring the distance of parked tires from curbs, checking mailbox paint colors like the FBI had assigned him a decorative crimes unit. At first, people joked about it. Better hide your azaleas, Lou once muttered when Russell walked by. But eventually the jokes stopped because the fines started showing up. $50 for garbage cans visible from the street. $75 for basketball hoops left near the curb overnight. One family got cited because their holiday wreath was apparently too large for seasonal compliance. And parking. Parking was Russell's favorite thing in the world. According to HOA policy, no vehicle could remain parked along community curbs for more than 30 minutes unless it was inside a designated visitor zone. Didn't matter if it was Christmas, a birthday party, or someone unloading groceries after surgery. Russell enforced that rule like his life depended on it. My younger brother Caleb found that out the hard way. He drove up from Atlanta one December for dinner, parked outside my townhouse because my driveway was full, and came inside carrying a stupidly expensive cheesecake he wouldn't stop talking about. We hadn't even finished eating before there was a knock at the door. I opened it and found Russell standing there in a fleece vest holding a violation notice. Not kidding. He actually smiled while handing it to me. Just doing my job, Ethan, he said. I looked down at the paper. $150 parking violation. I laughed because I genuinely thought he was joking. You're serious? Rules are rules. Caleb leaned around the corner from the dining room. Wait, you're fining me for parking outside during Christmas dinner? Russell shrugged. If we make exceptions for one resident, everyone expects special treatment. There are moments where somebody tells you exactly who they are, and you miss it because they say it calmly. That was one of them. After he left, Caleb looked at me and said, Dude, your neighborhood president acts like a mall cop who got cheated on. I shouldn't have laughed as hard as I did, but honestly, that line carried me for months. The problem was Russell didn't just annoy people. He embarrassed them. Diane got fined because her daughter's minivan stuck slightly over the approved curb line while unloading medical equipment for Diane's husband after knee surgery. Didn't matter. $220 towing fee. The Mendozes across the street received a violation because a delivery van sat outside their home for 42 minutes during a furniture installation. 42 minutes. And every time somebody complained, Russell gave the same speech. If the rules don't apply equally, the community falls apart. That sentence became his religion. The strange thing was, the rules only seemed sacred when regular residents broke them. Every 3 months, the HOA board hosted these social mixers at the clubhouse. Cheap wine, grocery store cheese trays, awkward conversations about property values, the usual suburban hostage situation. And every single time, the curb outside the clubhouse filled with cars for hours. Nobody got fined. Nobody got warned. Nobody got photographed. Russell's own black Mercedes would sit there all afternoon like it had diplomatic immunity. The first time I noticed it, I ignored it. Second time, I got curious. By the third event, something about it started bothering me deeper than it probably should have. See, before real estate consulting, before my divorce, before any of that, I spent almost 9 years working municipal code enforcement for Buncombe County. Most people hear that and think parking tickets and overgrown grass, but the job teaches you something important. Power doesn't come from confidence. It comes from paperwork, jurisdiction, technicalities, tiny lines buried in documents nobody reads. And Russell clearly had never met someone who actually understood how those systems worked. So during the fourth HOA mixer, while everybody else drank Chardonnay under string lights behind the clubhouse, I stayed home and sat on my porch with a legal pad. I wrote down every plate number parked along the curb, every arrival time, every vehicle location. Then I went inside and pulled up county property maps. And that's when I found it. One tiny notation buried in the original subdivision survey from 1987. The curb directly bordering my property line wasn't HOA-controlled common space at all. It was privately owned land. Mine. And suddenly, for the first time in over a year, I smiled. I must have stared at that survey map for an hour straight, maybe longer. Not because it was complicated, honestly the language was dry enough to sedate a horse, but because I kept waiting for the catch. There's always a catch with things like that. Some forgotten amendment, some hidden clause buried under 30 years of legal sludge that turns your perfect little discovery into absolutely nothing. But there wasn't. The original developer had divided the neighborhood in a weird way back in the late 80s. Most of the curbs fell under HOA-maintained common property, but a narrow strip along the east side of Briar Creek Lane had remained attached to the individual lots themselves. Probably some tax assessment trick at the time. Nobody noticed because for decades nobody cared. Then Russell came along and started acting like Emperor of Asphalt. I printed the county records the next morning and drove down to the assessor's office just to verify it in person. The woman behind the counter, an older clerk named Marcia with reading glasses hanging off a chain around her neck, looked through the documents for maybe 30 seconds before nodding. "Yep," she said, tapping the survey line with her pen. "That curb belongs to your parcel. And the HOA has no enforcement authority there." She gave me a little smile, the kind government employees give when they know drama is about to happen somewhere else. Not unless you sign something giving it to them. I hadn't. Driving home, I kept thinking about all the tickets, all the towing fees, all the smug little speeches Russell had given over the years about fairness and accountability. The more I thought about it, the more I realized the money wasn't even the worst part. It was the humiliation. The way he'd weaponized rules to make people feel small. And maybe this says something bad about me, I don't know. But once I realized I could legally flip the entire thing back on him, I stopped thinking about whether I should. I started thinking about timing. Now here's the part people online always misunderstand when they hear this story. They imagine I snapped one day and went full supervillain overnight. That's not what happened. This took weeks. Careful weeks. Because if you're going to teach somebody a lesson through bureaucracy, you better know the bureaucracy better than they do. First thing I did was contact the city about vehicle immobilization permits. In North Carolina, private property owners can legally boot unauthorized vehicles under specific conditions, but there are rules. Signs have to meet size requirements. Fees have to be clearly posted. Permits have to be active and visible. You can't just slap a boot on somebody's car because you're annoyed. I knew all that from my old county job, but I wanted everything airtight. The woman on the phone asked, "Commercial property or residential?" "Residential." There was this pause. "You expecting a problem?" I looked out my kitchen window and saw Russell across the street taking pictures of somebody's garbage bins with his phone. "Something like that," I said. "The permit cost me $110. Worth every penny." Then came the signs. Legally, they had to be visible from all entry angles, so I installed 3 of them along the curb. Bright reflective lettering. Unauthorized vehicle subject to immobilization. Removal fee, $200. Lou nearly choked laughing when he saw them. "Oh my God," he wheezed from my driveway. "You're actually doing it." "Doing what?" "You know exactly what." I tried to play innocent. but apparently my face gave it away. For the next month and a half, those signs sat there while the neighborhood slowly noticed them. Some residents asked questions. Others avoided eye contact completely because suburban neighborhoods survive through one sacred principle. Pretend conflict doesn't exist until somebody calls the cops. Russell definitely noticed the signs, though. One evening, he walked over while I was trimming hedges. "What's with the boot warnings?" he asked casually. I shrugged. "Private property." His smile tightened just a little. "You expecting unauthorized vehicles?" "Depends," I said. "People follow the rules around here, don't they?" That one landed. I watched the meaning hit him half a second late. Russell folded his arms. "You know HOA parking policy still applies to community areas. This isn't community property." "Yes, it is." I wiped my hands on a rag and looked him dead in the eye. "No," I said calmly. "It really isn't." That was the first moment I saw uncertainty creep into him. Tiny little crack. He recovered quickly, though. "Well," he muttered, "I'll have legal review it." "Please do." Then he walked away, pretending not to be bothered. But the next morning I caught him standing near the curb taking photos of the survey markers. 2 days after that, somebody from the HOA left a notice on my mailbox claiming the signs were visually disruptive to community aesthetics. I framed that letter. No joke. It's still in my garage somewhere. The board's fall social was scheduled for mid-October, a Sunday afternoon thing with catered barbecue and live acoustic music behind the clubhouse. Russell loved those events because they made him feel important. He'd walk around shaking hands like a small-town mayor, while people drank wine from plastic cups pretending the HOA wasn't siphoning half the landscaping budget into mystery, administrative expenses. By then, more residents were openly irritated with him than he realized. There'd been rumors for months about missing reserve funds, delayed maintenance invoices, selective enforcement. But nobody wanted to challenge him directly because Russell had built this atmosphere where disagreeing with the HOA meant becoming the HOA's next target. That's how petty authority works. It trains communities into silence. The morning of the event, I woke up weirdly calm. That surprised me. I thought I'd feel nervous or guilty or maybe childish, but mostly I just felt finished, like something overdue was finally arriving. At around 11:30, catering vans started pulling into the clubhouse lot. By noon, guests were arriving steadily. Families, board members, friends from neighboring subdivisions. And right on schedule, the curb beside my property started filling up. First an Audi, then a white Lexus SUV, then Russell's Mercedes. I sat on my porch with iced tea and watched the whole thing happen exactly the way I knew it would. By 1:15, there were 9 vehicles lined along my curb beneath 3 giant warning signs nobody had bothered reading because powerful people almost never think rules are aimed at them. Lou wandered over carrying a lawn chair. "You really gonna wait the full time?" "Oh yeah." This is the most entertainment this neighborhood's had since the Jenkins divorce. We sat there like 2 old men watching weather roll in. At one point Diane walked past us toward the clubhouse and quietly asked, "You sure this won't backfire?" I thought about that for a second. "Maybe," I admitted. "But honestly, I think letting people like Russell go unchecked backfires worse." She nodded slowly and kept walking. Around 2:30, I made the call. The immobilization company arrived in an unmarked white truck 20 minutes later. 2 guys got out wearing orange safety vests, checked my permit paperwork, then started attaching boots one vehicle at a time. Clank, click, clank, click. The sound echoed beautifully down the curb. The first person noticed around 3 o'clock. A guy in golf clothes stepped out of the clubhouse holding a beer, saw the bright orange boot on his BMW, and literally stopped walking mid-sentence. "What the hell is that?" One by one, people started pouring outside. Confusion turned into outrage almost instantly. "You can't do this. Whose truck is that? Call the HOA. This has to be illegal." And then Russell appeared. I will give him credit for one thing. He tried very hard to maintain composure at first. He marched toward me across the grass, jaw tight, phone already in hand. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" he snapped. I stood up slowly from my porch chair. "Enforcing parking policy." His face went red immediately. "This is HOA property." I handed him a copy of the county survey map. "No," I said. "It isn't." He looked down at the paperwork, then back at the curb, then at the signs he'd apparently ignored for 6 straight weeks. And for the first time since I'd known him, Russell Kane looked scared. Everything after that happened fast, but somehow also slow, The way disasters do when everybody realizes at the same time that nobody's in control anymore. Russell grabbed his phone immediately. "I'm calling the city," he barked. "Go ahead." One of the immobilization guys leaned against the truck completely unbothered, sipping gas station coffee like this was just another Tuesday. Meanwhile, the crowd outside the clubhouse kept growing larger by the minute. People who'd spent the last 3 years silently nodding along with Russell's speeches were suddenly discovering that rules felt very different when they were aimed in the opposite direction. The guy with the BMW kept pacing in circles. "I was only parked there an hour." I looked at him and shrugged slightly. Rules are rules. Lou nearly fell out of his lawn chair laughing. Russell shot me this look that honestly would have killed a weaker man on the spot. The city enforcement officer arrived maybe 25 minutes later, a younger guy named Travis I actually recognized from county training seminars years earlier. He stepped out of his vehicle already looking exhausted. "What seems to be the issue?" Russell practically sprinted toward him. "This homeowner illegally immobilized multiple vehicles during a community event." Travis glanced at the boots, then at my permit paperwork, then at the signage posted along the curb. "You the property owner?" he asked me. "Yep." He nodded once. "Permit's valid." Russell blinked. "Excuse me." Travis pointed toward the survey documents. "This curb falls under private parcel designation. Immobilization authorization appears compliant." There was this beautiful silence after that. Not quiet exactly. People were still muttering in the background, but emotionally, it was silence. The kind that happens when somebody's certainty collapses in public. Russell's voice got sharper. "That's impossible. The HOA governs this entire subdivision." "No, sir," Travis replied calmly. "Your HOA governs HOA property." And there it was. The line. The one thing Russell had spent years pretending didn't matter. Boundaries. Actual legal boundaries. The BMW owner immediately started arguing about the fee. $200? That's insane. One of the boot technicians shrugged. "Payments on the signs, sir." But nobody reads those signs. I couldn't help it. I laughed. Not loudly. Just enough. Russell turned toward me again. "You planned this." "Of course I planned it." "You deliberately targeted board members." "No," I said. "I enforced the rule equally. That's what you always taught us." That one hit hard. I saw several residents nearby physically look away, trying not to smile. Then came the phone call to Russell's attorney. That part's my favorite. He stepped off to the side near the clubhouse entrance, talking loudly enough for everyone to hear pieces of it. "No, they booted all of them." "Yes, I checked." "Well, can't we challenge the permit?" "What do you mean valid jurisdiction?" His tone kept changing every 30 seconds, moving from confidence to irritation to something dangerously close to panic. At one point, he looked over at me while listening silently, and I already knew exactly what his lawyer was telling him. "You're not winning this." The call lasted maybe 7 minutes total. When he hung up, he looked 10 years older. Meanwhile, people had started paying the removal fees one by one because honestly, what else were they going to do? The technicians removed each boot after payment with the same calm professionalism of airline employees processing luggage. Clank. Receipt. Clank. Receipt. By then, the entire event had completely collapsed. Nobody cared about barbecue anymore. The acoustic guitarist had quietly packed his equipment and disappeared sometime during the second argument near the Lexus. Diane walked over beside me while another vehicle got released. "You know," she said softly, "part of me feels bad for him." I watched Russell standing alone near the clubhouse doors while residents avoided eye contact with him. I did too, I admitted. For a while. And that was true. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about small power. People don't usually become like Russell overnight. Most of the time, they start with good intentions. Keep the neighborhood clean. Protect property values. Maintain standards. But somewhere along the line, enforcement becomes identity. And once authority becomes part of somebody's personality, they'll do almost anything to protect it. Even humiliate their own neighbors. Especially humiliate their own neighbors. The weeks after the booting incident were chaos. Neighborhood Facebook groups exploded first. Half the residents called me petty and vindictive. The other half treated me like I'd personally liberated Europe. One post literally called me the parking Batman. Lou printed that one and taped it to my mailbox. But underneath all the jokes and arguments, something important had shifted. People stopped being afraid of Russell. That was new. Residents started questioning things openly during HOA meetings. Financial records. Vendor contracts. Enforcement patterns. Why certain violations disappeared when board members committed them. And once people start asking questions in a system built on intimidation, things unravel fast. 3 homeowners formally requested an independent audit of HOA finances before Thanksgiving. Russell fought it hard. Too hard. That's usually a sign. Rumors started leaking out after that. Landscaping contracts tied to a company owned by his brother-in-law. Reserve funds being moved between accounts without full board approval. Selective waivers for certain residents. Nothing movie-level criminal. No hidden gold bars or offshore accounts. Just the kind of low-grade suburban corruption that grows quietly when nobody thinks accountability matters. Then, 1 week before the auditors arrived, Russell resigned. No dramatic speech. No apology. Just a bland community email thanking everyone 4 years of cooperative service. I read it twice and honestly felt nothing. That surprised me too. Because for months I'd imagined that moment feeling victorious, but revenge is weird. People think it gives closure when usually it just leaves silence where anger used to live. The truly funny part happened 30 days later. The parking restriction policy, the same sacred rule Russell defended like constitutional law for years, quietly vanished from the HOA bylaws during a December revision meeting. No announcement, no explanation, just gone, almost like it had never mattered in the first place. A few days before Christmas, I ran into Russell one final time at the grocery store. Frozen foods aisle. Of all places. He looked smaller somehow, less polished, like life had finally reintroduced him to the idea that he was just another guy buying microwave dinners under fluorescent lighting. For a second I considered walking past him. Instead I nodded. He hesitated before speaking. "You embarrassed me," he said quietly. I leaned against the shopping cart. "You embarrassed a lot of people." His jaw tightened. I was trying to protect the community. "No," I said. "You were trying to control it." That stung him because deep down, I think he already knew it was true. We stood there awkwardly for another moment surrounded by frozen pizzas and discount ice cream before he finally asked the question I think had been bothering him the entire time. Was all this really worth it? And honestly, that's the part one still think about. Because depending on who you ask, I'm either the guy who stood up to a bully or a middle-aged man who weaponized technicalities over parking spaces. Maybe both are true. I looked at Russell for a long second before answering. I think people should be careful creating rules they'd hate living under themselves. Then I grabbed my groceries and walked away. To this day, the neighborhood still argues about what happened. Some residents say I went too far. Others think I should have done it sooner. A few people still refuse to wave at me during morning walks. And honestly, that's fine. Communities are messy. Power is messy. Most conflicts aren't really about parking spots or garbage cans or HOA bylaws. They're about dignity. About whether people feel respected by the systems they live under. That was the part Russell never understood. If you want people to follow rules, the rules have to belong to everyone equally, especially the people enforcing them. So now I'm curious what you think. Was I justified for turning the HOA's own rule against them? Or did I become just as petty as the man I was trying to stop? Let me know in the comments, because I've heard both sides for years now, and honestly, this story still starts arguments every single time it gets told.